What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Joshi's Ramblings. Today, I want to talk about something that I've been thinking about a little bit more over the past couple of days, but I haven't necessarily put like a super hardcore thought into how to really explain it. So that's why we're making a rambling video. Sorry I haven't been uploading as much recently. To put it simply, I'm not enjoying the game all that much right now. The meta is miserable, to put it bluntly, but I'm sure a lot of you already know that. But today, I want to talk about one of the things that I've been seeing a lot in a lot of games that I play, not just against other guard players, but also just against players in general. And so, this is something that can help you if you are trying to play as a guard player, but also just generally trying to play the game in general. And the biggest thing that I kind of want to touch on is it's kind of twofold. One, the game does revolve a lot more now about just killing your opponent and utilizing late game scoring, and it has shifted. This was already true in Pry, Nexus, and Leviathan, but it's become especially true in Chapter Approved 2025. So I kind of want to talk about one of the big things that I'm seeing a lot of people really hurt their ability to play with in the most recent version of the game, and that is deploying too defensively. A lot of people that I've been seeing are just deploying so far back that they're losing the ability to actually play the game early on, and if they end up going first, they just kind of lose on the spot if they are deploying really defensively. And what do I mean by this? One of the biggest things that I've talked about in the past, if you've watched some of my other videos where I talk about the basic game plan of playing 40k, especially for guard, which is a little bit outdated now that 18 Bulgarian is not the normal way to play. One of the big things that I was talking about quite a bit was making sure that you can move into the midboard relatively early on in the game and being willing to take some losses and make sure that you are ready to get into firing lanes. You're not giving up too much on the first turn. But one of the big things that I think a lot of people, when they play, when they hear that they are supposed to hide most things, and I'll oftentimes say you should assume your opponent is good enough to not really give you anything to shoot on turn one, that is kind of true and kind of missing out on a little bit of the nuance that I think is really important to playing, particularly in Chapter Approved 2025. And one of the big things that guard players and a lot of other armies have the luxury of doing, or both the luxury and a necessity of doing, is putting some things that can get shot. And so one of the things that I've talked about quite a bit is when you are analyzing a board, one of the first things you need to do, and you should probably do this before you even get to event actually, is take a look at what the different fire angles are. So, if you're shooting past this point, you can shoot pretty deep. You can shoot almost to the corner of here. If you're shooting from here, you can't really shoot anything. But if you are even right here, there's a line to shoot into this ruin. And then can this corner and that corner see each other? Yeah, so this section isn't super safe. You should have a pretty good idea of what all these firing lines look like before you even get to the table, ideally before you even go to the tournament. But that doesn't mean you can't deploy in them, and in fact, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't deploy in them. A lot of the time when we're deploying, we need to make sure that we are making sure that our units can actually play the game. And so what I mean by this is, if you take a look at this firing lane again, so it's something like this, whatever. This line does exist. A lot of people might think, oh, that means I shouldn't deploy anything in this ruin because it's going to get shot on turn one. That's not true. You need to be using that space. And what it does mean is it changes what you are allowed to put in that space. And one of the big things that I want to try and get a lot of people to understand over the course of this rambling video is trying to identify what parts of your army you need to function and to actually play the game. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that we are trying to protect. One of the big thing. So a very normal list, if you have a Rogaldorn commander, especially with the Grand Strategist, which is very normal in a lot of combined arms lists these days, if this unit dies on turn one, we basically lose the game, right? We lose a ton of our damage output, we lose a ton of our orders, and it not only kills the Rogaldorn, it reduces the effectiveness of all the other tanks. So it's not just losing 300 points of tank, We're realistically losing about like 400 points of our army just instantly in one phase, one turn, whatever it is, however long it takes them to actually kill the tank. We cannot lose that on turn one. However, there are a lot of other things in our army that is of varying value depending on the matchup that we're playing. So one of the things that I'll often say is if I'm playing against armies that have 3-up save vehicles, like a lot of Space Marine variants are running like Predators, or if I'm playing against Chaos Space Marines or any of the Chaos Legions where a lot of their main shooting is coming out of Forge Fiends, a lot of the stuff has 3-up saves naturally, and therefore I don't necessarily need my Hellhound as much to strip cover because they're already going to be put on 4-ups or 5-ups between my Exterminator, Fields of Fire, and just the base AP of my guns. Whereas if I'm playing up against something like a Guard Mirror, the Hellhound is way more valuable because now the Ignores cover is another pip of AP that I need in order to punch through 2-up saves. And so one of the things that we can oftentimes do, and one of the things you'll often see me do, is I'll put my Hellhound right here, but I'll make sure that I'm angling it, you know, something like that, so it has cover, or make sure that it's wholly within this ruin, so it's not on 2 open cover. And because of that, my Hellhound is now more able to play the game. And it's able to play the game much faster than a lot of other people's Hellhounds. One of the other big things that I'm oftentimes looking to do, this is not the best map to show it off, but let me see. I can grab another map. They are easy to find. Um, let's look at this one real quick. And I'm going to do this because it's my video and you guys are watching it. Thanks for watching. Anyway, so one of the big things that we're oftentimes doing in games like this, or on maps like this, is we're trying to figure out how to get our Death Core of Krieg. And again, this is not like the best example, but on similar maps to this, oftentimes what you'll find yourself doing is you'll put out like a Kriegman here, and then the rest of them are hiding back over here. And a big reason for this is you need to make sure that this distance is 9 inches, and it is okay to give up some of the Krieg unit because you're going to be resurrecting them back. And a big reason for this, again, is of course you need to be ready to score Secure No Man's Land. You need to be ready to score Cleanse on turn 1, and if this distance is or if the distance is 9 inches, you can do that with move, move, move. But if it's 9.1 inches away, suddenly you're needing to roll in advance, and that makes it a lot harder to go for these cleanses, which means you have to do it with vehicles or some other kind of tool. So making sure that you can put these Krieg out in a position where even if they get shot, they'll just res guys and they'll end up being closer. There are, of course, some armies that you are not allowed to do this against. Like you are not allowed to do this against Votann, for instance, because a unit of 6 pikes pop the, if they double judge it on turn 1, pop the sustain 2, and they have ignores cover. Like a unit of 6 Votann bikes can just pick up a unit of 20 Krieg on the top of 1. That's something that we can't do. But it's okay if that unit goes down to like 4 models because the most important ones are still going to be alive. You're still going to have the medics at the end of it. So what this oftentimes means, and like ways that I see people do this incorrectly a lot of the time, is let's go back and we'll talk about this map again, right? So they'll take a look at this and they'll be like, oh wow, they can shoot everything in this triangle. Okay, let's say that they move over and realistically they can shoot everything like here by sticking a barrel out over this spot. So, realistically everything here, anything in here is potentially getting shot turn 1 on this angle. Okay, what else? Now, if they are over here, if they move to here, realistically, they can... Oops, not that. That's how I normally draw a line of sight. Just kidding. But, like, realistically, they can shoot... Yeah, I'm fudging it a little bit to just get the idea across. But, like, realistically, they can shoot anything in here if they go first. Right? Like, these are all things that they can shoot. And, of course, like... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, it's the middle. Convenient. And then you can also do a similar thing here. So like if they move 10 inches, they can shoot anything here, right? And again, I'll just do a similar thing over here. So, it's a little bit more generous than this, but the point remains the same. All of this, all of these red zones are places that your opponent can shoot on turn one if they want to. But it's really important to understand that they oftentimes don't want to. Oftentimes, shooting into these zones can lose them the game. So we can, and the other big thing is if we only deploy in these blue zones, right? Like this weird thing, and like here, we're going to lose. We're going to be too far back. And so one of the big things that you'll oftentimes see, or one of the big things that I see people lose them the game, is they'll be like, oh no, I can't deploy in these red zones because I will die. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to put my Lehman Russ battle tank here and here. And this is potentially game losing. And the main reason for this is these tanks are now no longer in a position where they can play the game on turn one, right? Or potentially even turn two because they are so far away from the action. And so, what can we do about this? Like, what do we need to think about in order to make sure that we don't deploy too defensively? So the first thing that we need to understand kind of goes back to that Hellhound, right? The Hellhound is a piece that in some matchups is very valuable. It's really good in the matchups we're playing up against things with 2+ saves. It is okay into things that we are playing up with 3+ saves, and anything like worse than that, like, there's some matchups where the 2d6 Flamer is really good, but after that it just becomes like this box that we're going to charge into things, but we don't care about it nearly as much. So the Hellhound is oftentimes a piece that I'm going to deploy right here. And you'll instantly go like, but Josh, they're going to shoot it on turn one. That's the point. That's a major part of it, actually. By putting this Hellhound out there, and let's say I have like a Lehman Russ that I've hit here, maybe I can fit two, and like maybe I have my Rogel Dorn here. Something like that, right? So we've done a couple of things in this deployment. Firstly, if they want to shoot down this firing lane with like a tank, there are very few single models that can kill a tank in one activation of shooting. Almost nothing. And then if those tanks like come out and try and take those shots up against the Rogel Dorn, well, they're probably in range for the Rogel Dorn to clap back really, really hard. So it's one of those things where you have to like make a judgment call. Is it going up against like 2 Bright Lances? Cool. Those 2 Bright Lances never killed the Rogel Dorn. Is my opponent a psychopath and put like Predator, like right here? Cool. Well, then I probably don't want to put this Rogel Dorn here because the only thing they can do is come out here and then shoot down this firing lane. That's really the only thing they can do. But you'll notice that the Rogel Dorn it's not getting shot from both this angle and this angle. I'm limiting the angles that my opponent can take to it into spots where they don't really want to be. So, okay, going back to the Hellhound. Now let's imagine in this example, once again, that our opponent has like, they've hidden a Predator here and a Predator here or whatever, and then realistically they probably have like Predator, Vindicator, something to this effect, right? I'm going to take the fire, let's be consistent. I'm going to take fire down this firing lane, okay? And there is not a lot in the game that is going to efficiently kill a Hellhound. It's still toughness 10, 2-up save, and 11 wounds. We're saving las cannons on 4s because we've put ourselves in cover. So in so doing, we are drawing our opponent out of their hidey holes to try and kill this tank. And they are not super likely to kill the tank, and even if they do, we are now in a spot where this tank and this tank and this tank can all move into the firing lane and shoot them back, right? If they come out and do battle against our Hellhound, a lot of armies lose the game on the spot. They can't fight, they can't shoot our Hellhound, they can't fight our Hellhound They do not want to take that engagement. Okay? And this allows our tanks to be deployed way farther forward because we understand what it is in our army that needs to live and needs to die. Okay? Or what needs to live and what can be used as bait. Okay? The other big thing about this is we've only examined what happens if our opponent goes first. They're now going to take some of their anti-tank, maybe, and choose to throw it into our Hellhound. Great. That means they're not throwing it into our Lehman Russes. They're not throwing it into our Rogel Dorns. They're maybe not throwing it into our Bulgren. They are throwing it into something that we are okay with having die on turn 1. Okay? But let's flip the script. Let's imagine now that instead of our opponent going first, we are going first. This Hellhound is now in a position where it can do area denial, where it can do cleanse, where it can do secure no man's land, where I can put it on the middle objective and terraform it if I need to on the first turn. This Hellhound is now playing the game immediately. It is now able to put that pressure on my opponent faster than a lot of people are willing to deal with. And again, we're at a spot where if this Hellhound moves out and just like toes onto this objective, there's not going to be, like, not every line exists, right? You're going to have to cut some fairly harsh lines in order to shoot at this Hellhound from certain objectives, and I can play with that relatively early on to control where my opponent is actually going to be able to shoot me from. But I am now playing the game, okay? I want to go back and compare this to what I see a lot of people do that is oftentimes game losing. So let's go back to, let's imagine that I'm trying to make sure my Hellhound doesn't get shot, and the Hellhound ends up being something like this. We have now used up a ton of valuable deployment space that we need to put things that we need to keep alive in the game. And so as we do this, as we put the things like, okay, yeah, like the Hellhound can still do that thing on turn 1 if it needs to, but now if we want to like put the Rogel Dorn in a spot where it can still play the game, now the Rogel Dorn is like, and we put like Lehman Russ here and Lehman Russ here, and we're like, oh god, I'm running out of usable deployment space. Well, I guess I have to put like the Rogel Dorn in this firing lane, which is way worse. You can put tanks from here can come shoot it. Tanks from here can come shoot it. Whereas if we put the Rogel Dorn over here, only this tank can come shoot it. Okay? So we're using a valuable deployment space. The other major thing is if you're like, I don't want my Rogel Dorn to get shot at all, and you end up putting it back here, well, the Rogel Dorn only moves like 10 inches, right? It only moves 13 inches, maybe 19 if we roll a really hot advance. But the biggest problem is anything back here, what's it doing turn 1? It's moving into this position. It's moving into this position. It should have started there. We are now a turn behind where the Rogel Dorn or whatever tank you want to use should be. It is an entire turn behind, and in a game that only lasts 5 turns, spending an entire turn putting our pieces where they should have been in the first place is game losing. So let's go ahead. I want to talk about a game that I played at Tacoma a little bit. And in this game, I was playing up against Eldar. My opponent had like a Wave Serpent here and like a Falcon here, something like this, okay? These tanks are safe. I cannot shoot them at all, okay? However, what these tanks ended up doing is this one spent like the first turn going over here. It should be there to start with, right? We are already way too far back. This one, right, should be here. It spent like its first turn moving here anyway. You're losing an entire turn of playing on the board, and that's simply too much, especially if you go first. And this ends up happening quite a bit. The one other example I kind of want to give is understanding how to get the game going a little bit more. So another game that I played down in Oregon, which I think was actually on this deployment as well, my opponent had a unit of 6 Bulgren, something like this. Or, let's do it, opponent, right. My opponent had a unit Bulgren, something like this. And he had the option, did he go first? Yes, he went first. He had the option to just throw this unit out into the middle on turn 1. And he chose not to. and I'm pretty sure that lost him the game. One of the biggest things about this is Bulgren are one of those units that they're really good into melee matchups and they're okay into shooting matchups. But the biggest thing is their value in shooting matchups is they are a damage sponge. Your opponent doesn't want to have to devote units to killing them. Your opponent doesn't want to have to devote models to actually dealing with this. They would rather just ignore it entirely. And if you just have the unit back here behind the wall, we can ignore it entirely, right? It's not in a spot where it can move very quickly. It moves 6 plus a charge, so it moves 18 inches. And so you just, you count out, it's like, okay, 18 inches is about here, just eyeballing it. That means that if I have my Hellhound, as an example, just on the edge of this thing, you now have to roll a 12 in order for this Bulgrin to actually make a charge. I'm okay with those odds. I'm willing to take that gamble. And that's one of the big things that I think a lot of people are missing out on is they're deploying too defensively. They're not taking the center very aggressively at all, and it's meaning that they are behind in tempo. The one other thing I kind of want to look at, so this is a deployment that Gustavo, who plays for Team Portugal, won. Was it Leicester, Leeds, whatever, South Coast? He won some UKTC super major. And he sent this as an example of some of what his early deployment actually looks like. And to me, this looks like turn 1-ish. But one of the big things that we should be paying attention to as we look at this is, this is already gone over here on turn 1. These tanks are already here. There's nothing. All right, I'm gonna turn this up. There's nothing deployed back over here except for screening units. All of these Krieg, I think these are Krieg, are just ready to go on the line. This unit is basically on the line as well, right? I guarantee that this unit here was deployed on the line here, where your opponent, if they really wanted to, could have come out and shot like that if they really wanted to. But it's all relatively aggressive, and so much of going first is about being aggressive. The other big thing that I want to talk about and why this is particularly important now, and it wasn't nearly as important, it was important, but it wasn't as important as it was in Pariah Nexus, is the game has become even more go second favorite than it was before. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, already, if you're going second at the end of the game, you get end of game scoring, which means you have an entire extra turn of movement to get to objectives at the end of the game, and you don't need to be standing them on at the end of 4. You just need to prevent your opponents from sending them for top of 5. And because of that, because you have so much of this extra freedom of movement, you have the ability to just go stand on objectives, and so you're going to score an extra 5, 10-ish points of primary that your opponent doesn't usually have access to. The other big thing is challenger cards. There's a long rant. If you guys have watched the Art of War Jack Crash Out video about challenger cards, it goes into way more detail than I could right now. But the basic principle of the video is if you go second, you have control over who is getting a challenger card. Okay, and so oftentimes what will happen is if your opponent goes first and they score, 5 points of challenger cards, you can be like, awesome, there's now no downside to me scoring 10 points, or sorry, if they score 5 points of secondary cards and you go second, you're like, awesome, there's now no downside to me scoring 10 points of secondary cards. Whereas if you're going first and you score 10 points of secondary cards, sometimes you're like, oh god, there's a lot of secondary cards right now that are worth about 3 points. If my opponent only scores a 3-pointer or scores a 4-pointer, and I've already scored 10, they're going to get a challenger card. So they actually have no reason to score a card for 2 points, right? They have no reason to do anything like that because not only are they going to gain a CP for it if they're playing tactical cards, but they're also going to get an extra 3 points from a challenger card that you should assume your opponent is almost always going to score. I think the average, I remember someone saying, the average challenger points, or the average challenger cards, if you draw a challenger card, the average points you're getting from a challenger card is about 2.7, which is ridiculous. It's basically 3, which means that you're scoring them at an insane rate. So you don't want to do that. Going second, you know what your opponent is going to score. You know what you need to score to either gain yourself a challenger card or to prevent your opponent from having one. And also, really funnily, if you draw Defense Stronghold or Sabotage, your points score later because they have not scored at the time that you go to the next battle round. So there's a lot of little advantages that are coming up in this. And one of the big ways that a lot of strong players have kind of figured out to prevent people from to prevent the go second like advantage from really manifesting is you just go kill them, right? It doesn't matter if your opponent's drawing secondary or drawing challenger cards if all of their models are dead. It doesn't matter if they're going to score at the bottom of 5 if they don't have any models to do it with. And the game has become much more aggressive than it was in Pariah Nexus, just because you're just going to go kill them, right? You need to go kill them right away. And if you deploy too defensively, you can't do that. And so you just lose on the spot if you deploy in a position where not all of your army can play on turns 2 and 3. Yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing about it. It's kind of like some bonus thoughts while I'm still here. A little bit sorry, like I said, about not posting as much. The meta is just really not fun for me. It's just, easy example. I had an RTT this last weekend, and I played Death Guard into no, I played Chaos Knights, and then I played Thousand Suns, and then I played Death Guard, and all of my opponents were great people, but I was a lot better player than all of them, and the games were like I was being pushed, right? It was just it just felt like the game has become way more about dice rolls right now than it does about like actual movement on the board, and it's still possible to mess it up, but players who are reasonably strong at the game should still have great results with a lot of these armies that are a bit too simple right now, and I'm not really enjoying it. I'll try and get a couple more Officer Training School stuff out in the meantime, but I hope you've enjoyed this interlude of Joushi rambling about going first and deploying too defensively. Make sure that you can deploy aggressively enough that you can just go fight them right off the bat. Yeah, the one other thing, I'm told that I need to be doing this more, so if you've gotten this far, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you give a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.